Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to M4L Academy. My name is Missy Karwowski, Director of M4LA, and I'm so glad that you have joined us tonight. So we are currently in our Back to School series in August. We're tackling the hidden hazards that can put kids at risk, and this can include in person and online. That's our focus this week. Overall, we're covering a number of really important topics that you don't want to miss to help you get prepared for a great school year ahead. Some of you might have already started. Some of you might be a few weeks out still. Either way, you don't want to miss any of the great content and speakers that we have coming up for our campus briefing series. As a reminder, with the campus briefings, we bring in experts, thought leaders, and policymakers to help simplify the complex topics, issues, politics, and policies that impact kids, schools, and most importantly, your rights as a parent. For August, we're doing some campus briefings, but special editions where we're bringing in folks from the front line, our amazing Moms for Liberty members who have tackled the challenges that we discuss in the campus briefings with the experts. They have faced them in real life. And so you get to hear from someone who has faced the challenges head on and how it actually works through the system and things to do to fight back. And not to mention some amazing guidance, direction, and encouragement. So yesterday we heard from Rebecca Meyer-Worthen, who revealed the reality of what's happening on school-issued devices. Tens of thousands of inappropriate search hits a day in a rather small school district comparatively, monitoring systems that miss dangerous content, and the new threat of AI-driven exploitation. She reminded us that technology, when left unchecked, can quickly become a pathway to harm. And that's really one reason why we need to focus and stay involved as parents. So today's conversation is not just going to focus online. Well, in reality, Rebecca's also brought the online into real life with the transition from online harms to real life dangers as well. Today, we continue with two amazing voices, Hillary Jackson and Emily Jones. Hillary will discuss critical gaps in medication safety. That's right. We're not just talking guns and what the hallways look like. Instead, we're going to include unqualified staff handling prescriptions and broken communication with parents on that one. And then she will give us concrete actions and steps to take to protect children's health at school. Then we're going to turn to Emily, and she'll share her experience with digital devices in the school. You might recognize Emily Jones from her amazing appearance on the Fire of Liberty podcast with Tina Deskovich. And if you didn't get to watch that, please make sure you go check out the Moms for Liberty channel. You can also find it on all your podcast platforms. It was a phenomenal story, and you definitely want to hear it because we won't get to dive quite into that depth today with Emily. So anyway, together their stories show a common truth. Parents cannot assume safety just because something is inside the school walls, which sadly, I think most of us do. We want to think that if we hand our kids off to schools, there's that unwritten contract that the reality is it's going to be safe, but it's just not that case. So whether the risk comes through a screen or a pill bottle, safety starts with informed, engaged parents who aren't afraid to ask the hard questions and be willing to push for change. Our first guest, like I said, is Hillary Jackson. She's a homeschool mom of two neurodivergent sons, a devoted wife, and the chair of Cuyahoga County chapter of Moms for Liberty. After living in Florida, her family moved to Brecksville, Ohio, drawn by the promise of incredible schools. Like many moms, she jumped in wholeheartedly, trying to be a great PTO mom, volunteering wherever she could, and enrolling her kids in every activity. But what she found instead sparked a deep passion for educational freedom, transparency, and defending the rights of parents to direct their children's upbringing. So welcome, Hillary. I'm so glad that you have joined us today.
Hi, Missy. Thank you so much for having me.
So I got a little bit of a sneak peek into your story, obviously, because we talked about this ahead of time. And I have to be honest, when I initially was thinking about safety in schools, I was not at all considering anything to do with the school nurse. That was, frankly, probably the last thing I would have thought of was school safety, which I feel really bad that I'm saying that because that makes me feel like I'm just not thinking of all the issues. But I'm just going to turn it over to you because you have such an incredible story. So talk to me about the safety issues you uncovered at your school or in your school district.
So just to be clear right off the bat, my children were not directly affected by this. However, my children are on the medications that were involved in the situation. So we had a school health aide. She was not a nurse, not licensed, and she was the woman who was administering medications to children, whether that be something over the counter or controlled substances. Um, and what we discovered kind of in the background through other parents talking was that there was a rumor that she was taking the kids medications like Adderall, and giving them either Tic Tacs, gum, Benadryl. We didn't know for sure, and the school hadn't said anything. And it wasn't until, I want to say, about a month later that the story ended up on the news. And that is how parents as a body got confirmation that, yes, this is in fact happening. And again, the only reason why I knew before it broke the news is because I had a relationship due to my involvement with the PTO, with the parents who were directly affected and were contacted by the school. So of course, it was one of those things where when it comes to children, there's only so much that you're allowed to say. I mean, there's HIPAA, there's rights, and I don't know if the school was allowed to say, hey, this is what was going on to everybody, but they didn't. And our kids kept going to the nurse, and the kids that had medication there kept getting their medication there. Obviously for how, God knows how long this was actually going on.
You said that there was no information given to the parents? Oh, wow.
None. Not until after the news broke the story, and that was a month after I initially heard something from other parents that did receive a phone call. Because my oldest son has Tourette's. Both of my sons have ADHD. So, you form a community, right, of parents who, are dealing with similar things. And luckily enough for my kids, with the work that I do, I was able to give them their medication at home, and they didn't need it throughout the day. But the whole thing that was going through my mind is, it's just one prescription change or one dosage change, and it could have been my boys. So, unfortunately, it was about a year after that is when we finally got the whole story. After the investigation, through the trial, all she was charged with was tampering with medical records, because supposedly that's how the actual licensed nurse found out that she was doing this. But she didn't reveal what she was giving the children instead until the day of her sentencing. And come to find out, she was giving them her Lexapro.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Lexapro is a very strong, very dangerous drug if you're taking it you don't need it. But also, it's not recommended for people under the age of 12 anyway.
Can you explain to people who might not know what Lexapro is? Can you just clarify what that is?
Yeah, Lexapro is an SSRI, so it's used for, as an antidepressant. It can really slow down your heart rate, your blood pressure, anti-anxiety. So it's not a medication that is typically prescribed to children anyway, but definitely not prescribed to children under the age of 12. And this was in the elementary building from preschool to 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so this was, like I said, this was sentencing, and sentencing happened earlier February of this year. So these parents were just beside themselves, because here you have, for truly an unknown period of time, that their kids weren't getting the medication that they needed. So as a parent, if you're seeing, I mean, you can tell when your child is struggling. And then obviously the teachers can tell when your child is struggling. So the logical thing would be, okay, my medication's not working. Let's adjust. So that could be increasing the dose. That could be trying a different medication. But in reality, these kids never had a chance because they weren't getting it. Also, there are some medications that can be given as an as needed basis, but there are others that can't. You need to be on them routinely in order for them to work, or also to avoid some pretty serious side effects. And that's just with their medication. Now you're bringing in a whole different issue where they were literally being given something very, very harmful. And it was on our local Facebook page where I saw a mom shortly after the sentencing. She posted something on there, and she said, if your child was affected by this, please reach out to me. And I reached out to her, not because, again, my child was not affected, but because my children were going to that school. My children are on that medication. Again, one prescription change, my kids will be needing to take that at school. And she was incredibly kind and was more than willing to talk about it because, come to find out, and again, this could be because of HIPAA, but none of the parents who were affected by this knew who the other parents were. So they were going through this whole process alone, not being able to talk about, to other parents affected, hey, did your child say this to you? Or, they didn't know what questions to ask. They didn't know what their child said happened, so how can you really kind of charge somebody with assault, battery, if you don't have all the information? And that is what happened. She was only charged with theft of medication and tampering with medical records. And it's, it was a 2-year sentence, basically a slap on the wrist for what she did. But the big problem came after all of that came to light. Again, the school didn't acknowledge that the sentencing was out there. It was televised. There was nothing sent home about the new protocol for medications. There was nothing about
the sentencing was televised and the school didn't notify the parents that, oh, wow, that seems like a strange way to handle that.
It was strange because you would think, if anything, they would at least say, this is what we're doing differently from now on. But there was nothing. So what I ended up doing was, frankly, I got really upset. I got really mad. So I went on that same Facebook group that we have. I mean, there's thousands of people on there, and I kind of called out the board and the superintendent saying, hey, we need to meet about this. Like, we need to have a town hall, a come to Jesus meeting. Like, we've got to talk about this so we know what's going to happen going forward, what us as parents can expect, and have some questions answered. So the superintendent did finally send something out saying that, yes, we will have a town hall. So we did, and I showed up. And the reason why I showed up, I was not planning on going, but other mothers who were directly affected by this reached out to me because of that initial post. And they said, hey, will you ask these questions for me on my behalf? I'm really afraid that I'm going to break down, lose my cool. My kids still want to go to school there. I don't want to alienate them any more than they already, possibly could be, because when you're neurodivergent, sometimes it's not invisible, and one of the children affected was a nonverbal autistic child. So, yeah. So
I feel like that child doesn't have a chance to really stand up for themselves in that sort of situation. That's pretty awful.
No, it was just an evil act for somebody to do. So I had my list of questions that these mothers were asking of me, and I came there prepared to ask them, and a few of them I did, and one of those being, what exactly is the process when a child goes into the nurse's office to get their medication. Give me a breakdown, from the moment that door handle turns. I wasn't able to get that answer. The school nurse that they have, the nurse that's over all of the buildings in my district, was kind of dancing around it. Well, we have a policy in place. We keep the medications locked up. And I said, like, talk to me like I'm an idiot. Tell me step by step what happened. And she couldn't answer that. But what we were able to get out of her was that the name of the child is supposed to be verified in some manner. And one of the moms
Well, that's encouraging, right?
yes, it's something. But one of the moms that did decide to show up to the meeting, she did decide to speak up for herself, so I didn't have to ask a lot of those other questions. She said that her son never was asked a name, nothing.
Oh, wow.
And
Probably I could see it as one of those protocols like, oh, well, I recognize them, so I don't have to ask. But that's a really important point, that if you have a protocol in place, then it needs to be followed for very specific reasons. Partially because I think kids will come to expect it then. That's a good thing. And what if you have someone standing in to fill or be handing out prescriptions, then you want that same protocol followed.
well, right. And not just for, the child to make sure that they get their medication right, but also because if somebody skips a step, that child should say like, hey, like something's off, or another nurse in the building or whoever's in that room can say, hey, make sure you do this, just accountability.
Yes.
And it came to light that parents were dropping off medication that wasn't being counted, that supposedly is part of their policy. And now when I asked, I said, where is this policy, because I looked on your website and I can't find it. And the answer I got was, well, not every policy might be published. I said, well, but it should be at somewhere, right? So to kind of break down why this is not an issue just in Brecksville and why it could happen anywhere is what I have kind of written out on these slides, if we can get those pulled up. It's, do you know your school's policy? Now, yes, and again, the health aide was stealing the medication, was drugging the students, and only sentenced for 2 years. The school that I live in is Brecksville. It's one of the top performing schools in the state, but it doesn't matter. It can happen anywhere, and the reason why it could happen anywhere is because of the lack of state control. Now, I will say I am a huge advocate, and a lot of us, obviously, in Moms for Liberty, we are an advocate for local control. We don't want to have government overreach. The persons who are deciding these policies and these protocols are your school board members. So that is the one reason why it can happen anywhere, because we have school boards in every district, right? So all that they're required to do is to just write a policy. That's pretty much it. And with this particular situation, the response from the school, now mind you, this is the top, this is the top performing school. When a lot of parents were asking, well, why wasn't it the school nurse, the person that's licensed? Why weren't they administering the medications? Well, in the state of Ohio, you don't have to be licensed to be a school nurse. You don't have to be licensed to administer medication. It's up to your school's policy. And, again, a lot of the parents were, one, not aware that it was the health aide and not the nurse administering medication. So the parents didn't know who it was giving it to them, or giving them the medication to their children. Also, again, when the question came up, well, why isn't it the school nurse? The response was, well, if you guys would pass more levies, we could afford real nurses. Mind you,
as in higher taxes?
It's, fiscal responsibility plays a huge part in this. If that is what their excuse is for not having at least a nurse in every building, or a nurse that can, do rounds when it comes to medication, or hiring somebody part-time. That's just a non-negotiable for me and for a lot of the other parents that were there. So the excuse that the nurse was giving the parents, and this is kind of what kind of led a lot of parents to believe that this was going on for a while, is because every once in a while, a parent that I spoke with personally would get a phone call saying, hey, your medication from this aide, hey, your medication fell on the ground. The count's going to be a little off. The parent would respond, where is it? Like, I'll take, I'll take it with me or whatever. But even so, where's that? Well, what did you do with the one that fell on the floor? Well, the nurse would respond, or I'm sorry, the health aide would respond saying, well, it rolled under the desk and I couldn't get it. So
that seems like a safety risk right there, quite frankly.
It is a safety risk. So what's the policy and protocol for discarding medications that fall on the ground? There isn't one. There isn't one. And there's nothing that, the state mandates to have, anything like that. As far as like disposal, you have something for, obviously like, blood and vomit and things like that, or, needles. But as far as medication that, falls on the floor that they can't give to kids, there's nothing. So there's no way to account for that missing medication. So that's how she got away with it for as long as she could. And again, we kind of already went through a lot of these things, that the one student was nonverbal. So, what is that kid going to do? And I asked that question. The school nurse that was at that meeting couldn't tell me how they verified the medication with a nonverbal child. Again, the superintendent, what he said was very interesting to me, because he said, well, if somebody had suspicions, and this kind of goes to the point that you made earlier, Missy, if somebody has suspicions that their child isn't being given their medication, or that they're being given something different, why didn't you, nobody called to say anything? Yeah. And I was just incredibly offended by that, because it was the last thing on our minds. Your mind doesn't even go there, that your child is being drugged by a staff member at this incredible school district. Your mind does not even go there. So that was, for me, victim shaming, victim blaming, whatever the correct term is. It was just a lack of accountability and trying to pass the buck, which, gave me a really, really bad taste in my mouth. And that is what caused me to, I pulled my, now my older son was already pulled out of school, and I was homeschooling him at the time, but my youngest, I pulled him out for sure after that, because for me, this was an administration that just wasn't willing to be held accountable, which would lead me to my next slide of why we have to ask these questions, why parents have to be advocates. And the reason is because nobody else is going to do it for you. Even the state's not going to do it for you. The Ohio Revised Code mandates that the district has to adapt a policy. That policy will include who is allowed to administer medication. The school board is the person that designates the employee. It could be any employee. It does not have to be a registered nurse. It could be the janitor if the board votes that the janitor is allowed to give the medication. Now, there must be a parental consent form, and that consent form shows that this is the medication that my child is allowed to have, but it doesn't say anywhere on who that person is. The parents give consent, for like, again, for that medication to be there, but the consent form does not say, I consent to so-and-so, so-and-so, and so. Like, there's no names, there's nothing on there. So truly, the parents have no idea who it is giving their kids medication. And again, there does have to be a designated procedure for training somebody that's not a nurse or an LPN, but it's not a standard training. It's just, you find a LPN or an RN to teach somebody, what medication safety, how to identify what medication looks like, how to read a bottle, like very, very basic things. And, I put it in all caps. We do not have laws that protect our children from medication mismanagement in schools. Your board decides all of that. It is so, so, so important who you put on your school board. And then the next slide is, or my last slide, what parents can do. You have to demand a copy of the medication procedure policy, not just their consent form. You need something in writing, everything that happens the moment your child enters that room. If they cannot provide one to you, it's a very good possibility that it doesn't exist. And it's something that, nurses, or you would think people who have been in this industry for a while, you would think that it would be common sense or common practice to them. But because of the lack of standards that you have to have in order to be a school health aide, or the lack of qualifications or requirements, you have to know. You have to know what's going on in there. You can't assume anything. And also, you have the right to know what happens the moment that your child steps foot in anywhere in that building. Next is to do a record request asking for a list of all of those board-approved staff members who are trained to administer medications. And I would do your own background check on all of those people, whether or not something comes up, but at least you know who they are. And if something does come up, bring it to your board's attention. This woman, she had a write-up for something very similar to this before. She was still employed there.
The health aide had a public write-up that was available for other people to find. Wow, that is crazy, because I feel like just a basic background check ought to have revealed that by the school. And that is, I know my family works in the medical field, and sorry to divert, but real quick, just something you had said previously is that this opens loopholes, or these loopholes open the door for someone who is maybe an addict or struggling with medication addiction to come in and steal the medication, which is what happened. Not saying that this person is an addict. I don't know anything about the health aide in question, but people like that tend to be more likely to
Yeah, it opens the door wide open. And you got to think, all you have to do is interview well, and then sit through a training if you haven't already, for a few hours, and then that's it. So absolutely, do your own background check. And this next one is kind of, it's the heartbreaking one, is you have to teach your children to be their own advocates. Familiarize them with their medications. What does your medication look like? What does it taste like? Does it have writing on the capsule? And that's a lot to ask of your child. It is. It's a lot to ask your student to be burdened with memorizing the little numbers on their pill bottles, or on their, on the pill itself, when they're trying to, master multiplication. And also, once you get a copy of that medication procedure policy, discuss it with your child, so that your child will recognize, hey, they did not ask me to verify X, Y, or Z. I did not see them take my medication out of my bottle. It was already there ready to go for me in a little paper cup, which is what was happening at my school. So, that way they know if something is off, and they can advocate for themselves. Next, ask to see a disposal bin. There's no reason why they shouldn't have one. If a pill falls on the ground, in my personal opinion, the parent should be able to go to the school and pick that medication up. I mean, whether they dispose of it themselves, if it's not in a disposal bin, how are you going to account for it?
I would be curious about the actual medical laws for that. And I'm not saying I disagree with you. I know there's so many restrictions around it, but the idea of it, nevertheless, whatever the laws are, or I'm pretty darn certain that they don't include just leaving medication lying around on the floor of a school.
Under a desk.
Yeah. I don't feel like that would qualify. Yeah.
Well, but the issue is here, Missy, is that when you have medication that is a controlled substance, you can't just get a refill whenever you want. It has to be done after a certain period of time to make sure that, the medication's not being abused. So whether that's like every 30 days or whatever. So when something like this happens and your child needs a refill a day or two earlier, how are you going to fight with either your doctor or the insurance to account for it fell on the floor? That I don't know. And that's something that, maybe the solution to this could be as simple as having a disposal bin at the school and having it documented with a letter by the nurse, or, signed by whoever. But if they don't have one, demand one. for situations just like this. My kids spill things all day, every day, and I can, and I've watched them, try to, the same medication. They go to put it in their mouth, and then they realize that their mouth is on their face instead of over here, and they'll literally do this, and it falls on the ground. It happens to my kids. I'm sure it could happen it obviously happens, with everybody else's. So something has to be put in place for that. Perform your own audits. When you go to the nurse's office initially, if their policy, if it isn't, it should be to count exactly how many pills you are giving them. Keep track. Show up a week or two later, perform your own audit, and make sure that the pills that they are supposed to have, they have. And if they don't, it should be documented somewhere, and you should have been made aware of it. So yeah, you have to be your own auditor as well. And then lastly, encourage your board to be fiscally responsible. Of course, school boards get a lot of grief already about how they spend their money and where their money goes, where the money's coming from. But when it comes to our children's safety, it's a non-negotiable. If you feel the way I feel, and I hope that you do, talk to your board and encourage your board and ask your board, do we have enough licensed nurses or LPNs on staff to be the only people administering medications? Health aides are great to take temperature, make phone calls, whatever. I'm not a nurse. I'm just a mom. So I know that I'm the one that has to do absolutely everything. But, there has to be a better solution than just whoever your board decides as far as who is giving your child the medication.
I think that's a great point, and I really appreciate these very clear action items and suggestions for people to take back to their schools. I think that's so needed, because sometimes we hear all this stuff and we go, "Oh my gosh, what can I do? What can I do to make sure this doesn't happen in our school?" So I really appreciate you pulling that together. That was an incredible story. We're going to bring you back for our Q&A at the end of the show. And for now, we're going to transition over to our next speaker. So now we're going to move from the real world, I guess, to the online world and talk about some digital safety considerations. And our next guest is Emily Jones. She is a parent advocate and chair of Moms for Liberty in Madison County. She's a leading voice in the fight for transparency, data privacy, and parental consent in education. Emily has been at the forefront of efforts to raise awareness about the risks of classroom technologies, including artificial intelligence, digital surveillance, and third-party data collection. Her work focuses on ensuring schools prioritize student safety, protect sensitive information, and uphold parental rights in an increasingly technology-driven learning environment. So please help me welcome Emily to the stage today.
Hi, how are y'all?
I'm good. Wow. So I am so excited to talk to you because my background is actually in technology. Prior to working with Moms for Liberty, I have worked in business and technology for a long time. And that is, I think a lot of us feel that, or we might have initially felt that technology for our kids, this can't be a bad thing because we're all using technology. But the reality is, I think people are starting to see more and more that technology isn't necessarily a good thing for kids, especially kids in schools. And you have, now just a reminder to anyone, if they have not already seen it, they should go check out your full story on the Moms for Liberty Fire of Liberty podcast. Your show is excellent. But if you could just share a brief background or just your story on what got you engaged and what safety concerns you found in the online world with your son.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you, I have a background in the defense industry, so very tech heavy, very cyber focused. So I have a little bit more understanding of the risks of being online and technologies, probably more than the average person. I am certainly not an expert. There's plenty of things I can learn, but just the everyday average person, I just have a little bit more exposure to it, so I understand a lot of the dangers. And, the short version is my son's in public school. He has a school issued Chromebook. And he brings it home every single day, which is very good. It's a very positive thing. If your kids aren't doing it, you need to ask why and get them to do that. But
just to clarify, you mean if the kids aren't bringing their Chromebook home, then we should be asking why.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And we'll talk later about some of the reasons kids don't do that. But they should be bringing them home. There's no reason for a parent not to have access to what's happening on that Chromebook. We live in a world where we don't have the hardback textbooks like, when we were kids. Everything is digital. That means your child is exposed to the digital world every single day that they're sitting in a classroom, whether it's in the textbooks or online, or in like my case, my son was on an app called Epic, EPIC, and it's an online library. And there's a lot of really good content in it. But my son noticed at school another child reading a book that really they should not have been reading. They shouldn't have even had access to it because of the laws in Alabama, things that are prohibited from schools accessing. So my son came home and was telling me about this book. So I pulled out his Chromebook and I start looking through to find this book and see what other content I can find. So the short version is I find a whole genre of books and videos all under LGBTQ. So you couldn't necessarily search for a specific title, but if you look for that genre, you could find just hundreds of books. So
interesting. So just to be clear, then you said the laws prohibit this in schools?
Yes. Yep. In Alabama, the current law is that K through 5 cannot have anything around LGBTQ, gender ideology, any of that, very broad terms, but they can't have anything in K through 5. So this was an issue. And my son, thankfully, he knew this. So he knew that it was wrong and that the school should have had it. So we go through it, find all this information. And I contacted my son's principal, and I have a really great relationship with him. So I knew that he would be very concerned about what we had discovered. So I sent him the information and said, really, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with the form. The policy just says use this form, but it doesn't say what to do beyond that. And he was really funny. He responded back and said, well, this is the first. I've never gotten the form. I don't know what to do either, but we'll figure it out. So he took the form, and within a week he called back and said, he went through the app that I had told him about. And basically he said, I didn't even know the app existed on the computer, much less what was in it. I've sent this to the district office, and they too had no idea this even existed. And we've gone through it. We have found lots of concerning content, and we have made the decision that we're going to prohibit access to these books. So the short version, they cut off access to like that genre of books that year. And then this past school year, they actually disabled the app entirely. So no one can access it, period. Yeah. Yeah. So huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but it all goes back very much like Hillary was saying. It starts with knowing the law and the policy and what you can do as a parent to research this stuff and elevate issues when you discover them, and then work towards a solution. And this one ended up being a very positive and easy solution, but it's what got me started in the world of apps and websites that are accessible to kids on these school issued devices.
I'm shocked you say that the principal and the school board did not even know that these apps were installed. Yep. That seems, well, when we talked to Rebecca, she was saying something relatively similar, just talking about the requirements on schools. But I would have expected at the very, very minimum that you would have an understanding of what comes installed on the device itself. How do do you have any idea how they go about determining that? They put protocols in place?
Well, not entirely. I know for the apps, like they have a list of apps that are approved. So obviously there's a procedure for all of those. The question is, how did this one kind of sneak through? And my assumption is, and I've not been able to confirm it, but my assumption is, like you say, it was pre-installed. So the system never made like a conscious decision to say, we're going to allow these in there. They're just there. And until a parent or a student raises the concern, I mean, I don't expect the principal or the superintendent to get the computer out and like snoop around to see, like they've got better things to do, right? But the content's still there. And then, fast forward to where we are now, where you've got AI in the classroom and technology is being pushed nonstop, it really makes you have to pause and question, how is this getting in there? More importantly, what else is there that the superintendent or the system as a whole does not even know about? And what are they doing to prevent that and put protocols in place to protect kids?
That was exactly where my mind went, was if they didn't know about this one. And I have to be honest, if anyone who's ever purchased a new cell phone or a new computer has probably experienced this, where there are applications that come pre-installed with the software, with the operating system, that just is basically how, unless you are building your computer from scratch, and I don't think many of us are doing that, especially not in school districts, there is going to be some software already installed on the computer. However, I would expect that the contracts with these companies ought to be requiring applications that would be allowed and not allowed, especially in this situation. That is so scary to think of other applications that could be installed on the computer that nobody even has thought to look for.
Right. And I mean, I'm really anti social emotional learning in the classroom. It does not belong there. A lot of people think it's there and it should just be a parental consent option, regardless of where you stand on that particular issue. That's another one that's a major problem with these apps, is that, and just technology in general, there's a lot of surveys that come through these apps and these websites that parents are supposed to be consenting to one way or the other. If kids can just access these things without the system knowing that it's there and without parents consenting, then you've got like a massive federal violations, because kids are completing forms, potentially providing, we call it PII, personally identifying information. They can be sharing that information unknowingly, and it's being collected and sold off to third parties, but it's being done without awareness through the system or consent from the parent. So it starts getting into this legal matter super quick if you don't have the framework in place at the district level to go through and review all of the apps, regardless if it's a pre-installed or it's something you're adding along the way. But that piece, there's just kind of a gap in the procedure from what I can tell. But it's pretty risky. It gets legal issues really fast.
I'm hearing something that in my opinion, all school boards, all school districts, all superintendents ought to immediately perk their ears up, because yes, that is a real issue. The fact of the matter is, it's not really, the law doesn't care if you didn't know about these applications on there. If you commit a crime, or the kids if this is happening, now you've committed a crime, and that really puts you at risk. So just saying, I think you made a great point to anyone who is even resisting the idea of not checking their devices, that just to avoid legal issues, they ought to be doing a much better job of that.
Yep, 100%. So, and then you've got AI that really is being pushed. I mean, I love President Trump and the things that he's doing in this administration, specifically around education. But one of the things that he and I will always differ on is AI in the classroom. His administration is pushing really hard to have more AI in the classroom. I am on the exact opposite of that. I think we really need to hit the pause button and assess AI and what it's doing to kids. You've got, just a plethora of issues. You've got data privacy issues, but you also have the emotional impact that AI has on kids, psychological problems, and then just impacts to educational excellence. You're not allowing kids to think critically. They're using these other tools, assets, whatever you want to call them, that really takes away that learning aspect. So for me, I really struggle with AI in the classroom. I've been pushing back pretty hard on that, and probably will continue. But it really made me kind of go a step further in what I've been doing with my son's computer, and really specifically looking at things around AI, technology in general, but specifically around AI. My school district, they're really good with their policies. Like, they are the gold star, in my opinion, when it comes to policies and communication. But they have a really good policy on technology, and it really lists out, that they do not allow ChatGPT. It talks about that they have approved AI platforms. it's really good, but it's also very vague. I'm a very detailed person. So, Terry, if we can pull up those slides, I want to cover a couple of the apps that I found through discussion with my superintendent. So a couple of these I think are pretty standard across the country in terms of school districts using them. But these are apps that are on probably every computer, at least in the state of Alabama. Like I said, they're probably much broader in where they're located. But they're all AI based, and there's good pieces to them. Don't get me wrong. There's really good beneficial aspects to them, but there's also a lot of things that we really don't fully understand, and why I keep saying like we need to hit the pause button when it comes to AI. So Go Guardian is one that if you're not familiar with it, it can be an amazing tool. There's really great intent behind Go Guardian. And basically what it does is it provides teachers, administrators, superintendents, whoever it is within the district to watch, monitor, oversee all of the devices within the system. So like for my son's Chromebook, if he were to pull out his Chromebook and search up pornography, there would be a red flag that goes off using the Go Guardian app that alerts his administration. This device registered to so-and-so has violated, federal, state laws because they've searched up content that's only available to 18, whatever the little flag is. It would alert them. So it helps the school district ensure that the devices are not being used inappropriately. Totally on board with the aspect behind it. I think all of us agree kids don't need to be accessing that. Where it starts beginning to get a little bit dicier, and this is why a lot of school systems will not send their Chromebooks home, is if a child takes a school-issued device home on the weekend outside of school hours, and they start searching up something about self-harm or harming those in the community, same thing. There's an alert that goes off within the district to let them know this device registered to so-and-so is being used for whatever the topic is. The school district at that point has a legal responsibility to engage with that child. Obviously, we would want that. We don't want kids doing harmful things to themselves or others. Great intent behind the app. Even though this is happening on a weekend outside of school hours, the school legally has a responsibility to engage in that situation. So what schools have done is they've just prevented kids from taking these devices home because it removes that legal responsibility. If they're searching for it, they're searching on their own home devices. The school doesn't get the alert. So it removes them from, lawsuits or any type of legal action. But it creates this other issue where parents now don't have access to devices to be able to go in and look to see what exactly is on a kid's school-issued device. So Go Guardian, it has really good intent behind it, but there's also some pitfalls to it when you're looking at the situation holistically, that it's really creating some concerns for parents. Not to mention, kids know that it's there. They know they're constantly being surveilled. And that, for me, is another massive issue when it comes to technology is we're creating kids that are used to constantly being monitored. They're being forced to deal with all of this technology and oversight as if it's normal. So they never get that true privacy to really grow and be kids independent of constantly being monitored. Whole nother issue, but it's a growing trend that I'm not on board with at all for that one. The other one go ahead.
I just want to say super quick that that's an interesting and I think probably a little bit controversial concept, the idea that our kids are not having a chance to grow unmonitored. I'm doing a lot of research for our upcoming month on EdTech data collection, on social media and gaming, and all of the books I'm reading about that, the papers I'm reading. That's exactly right. And it's incredible how much we overlook the fact that there's a real value to being able to grow and have to make your own decisions and take risks that you don't have the safety net of an adult to fall back on. And sometimes that's going to be not good stuff. And I got to be honest, I feel like the online world is significantly worse than the in-person world. But that's just that I just want to support that statement because you're touching on a really, really good topic that I don't think is talked about enough.
Yeah, I mean, the psychological impacts of kids constantly thinking that they're being watched and monitored is detrimental, and we're not talking about it enough. I read the book Coddling of the American Mind recently, and I mean, massive research that shows how detrimental this is because we don't have child-based or play-based childhoods anymore. And even when they do get playtime, they're constantly being monitored. So they're missing out on the opportunity to have the natural conflict and conflict resolution that happens when kids are out on the playground. So creating this environment where they're constantly monitored, it really is going to have much longer lasting impacts than we truly understand at this point in time, which is why AI in the classroom is so scary to me.
I agree. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to totally redirect. I just thought that's such an important topic. I didn't want to let it slip by. What are these other applications, and how, it's so funny because you have peer helper programs listed, and gosh, I would have thought so many people think that's such a good idea to be allowing peer helper.
Well,
why is that a problem?
It all goes back to data collection. So iReady is a really big one in Alabama. That's the one they use for math and reading performance. It's, again, really great tool, great intent behind it, but it's all about data collection and algorithms. So a child goes on to do their homework and they start doing this quiz. Well, if they get it wrong, the system automatically generates additional questions for them based on what they got wrong. Again, sounds really good intent-wise that we're helping focus on the weaknesses, but it's data collection on the child, and then it's constant reissuing of questions, which it eventually starts leading to frustration and just brain drain for kids because they can't get past a certain point. Whereas if we had human interaction with the teacher's going to stop, say, okay, let's break this down and see what part of this you don't understand. Let's work on that specific piece, then apply it, and let's work through it again and see if we can get a correct answer. You don't have that when you're using these technologies and these AI generated tools. It's intentionally just algorithm based to constantly force your child to readdress the same issue, but there's not really an additional teaching aspect. And then peer helpers, again, like this goes back to social emotional learning in the classroom. It's very much data collection. So these apps, a lot of them have the surveys on there that I mentioned. They seem innocent, not a big deal. I've told the story a million times. On my son's computer, when he opens it up, there's a little box that comes up and basically says, how do you feel today? And there's a red face, a yellow face, and a green face. So the child essentially has to go in and say how they feel that day. Well, this all goes back to the peer helper. If you say constantly that you feel bad, then in theory, the school is going to assign somebody to you to help figure out what's going on. Are you just lonely and don't have friends, or is there something bigger going on? But the school, the system, the app is collecting that information, that feedback on your emotional state. And again, most parents are not aware this is happening, much less are they consenting to it, or do they know the full context of what's happening with that data collection on the backside. So these all sound innocent on their surface. There's good intent behind a lot of them, but when you really start to understand what's happening behind the screen, it really starts becoming terrifying to what's happening to your kid, whether you know it or not, the data collection piece of it, the psychological impacts, whatever it is. So we've just got to do a better job talking about all of it, kind of baselining, getting parents to understand exactly what all this means, and more importantly, what they can do to get engaged to start really helping their school systems do a better job assessing it all.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah. And then if we can go to the next slide, I threw in a couple of quick little things that parents can do. We're all busy, and I know technology and AI is just stuff that most of us don't fully understand. So we kind of put it on the back burner because it's just a concept that we don't want to deal with. But it's something we've got to deal with because we're seeing it more and more and more, and it's just really not going to go away. So a couple of really simple things that parents can do just to level set, just to have a better understanding so you can have better questions or better conversations with your administrators. The first one is very simple. Ask your school district what apps are currently being used by your kids' classroom. Here in Alabama, we have a transparency law that says every school has to provide this on their public website. So for me, it was just a quick downloading of what was on the website. Not every state's that good. So you may have to go ask the question and ask for that list of apps. From there, it's not on here, but audit that list against what your kid's computer has. Because like I said, my son's list did not have Epic on it, but it was on the school Chromebook. So audit it, make sure there's nothing on the Chromebook that's not on that list. The next one is request your data privacy policy. Again, hopefully that's already on the website and you can just pull it down from the school district itself, not have to ask for it. But if it's not out there, ask for it, make sure they have one. If they don't have one, remind them that federal law mandates that they have one, so they don't get an option on that. They've got to have one, regardless of how detailed or vague it is. They have to have a data privacy policy. And then opt-ins for mental health and behavioral tools. There are tons of these apps on these Chromebooks. Whether the school districts know or not, they are there. You have a right as a parent to say yes or no to that. Again, it's going to be one of those things where it gets a little dicier because not all states have a law for that. But given the recent rulings we've seen out of the Supreme Court, this should be a very simple thing to say. All of it ties back to religious beliefs. I want to opt out. I say it's easy. It's easier said than done for sure. And then the last thing is just pushing for school boards to create parent transparency dashboards. Parents need to know what's happening, whether it's the curriculum that's in the school, whether it's the apps that are being used, whether it's the policies and how they're applying these things. There needs to be some type of dashboard on schools' websites that allow parents to have more insight into what's happening. You may not be able to get down to the nitty-gritty details of what's happening in every single classroom, but you should at least be able to see what kids can access and what curriculum is being used to teach your kids. So if that's not happening, you need to push your school boards to start developing a lot of that locally.
I love the idea of a dashboard. I think that is a really unique solution that I have not heard before. And frankly, coming from my background in BI and data analytics, I'm like, yes, dashboards. Dashboards are so
yes,
fun.
make them interactive, all the things. I'm with you.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Well, I love the simple solutions that you presented to parents there. And I know we've talked about some other ones as well. So I'm hoping now let's bring Hillary back and dive a little bit more into the details on just what the different experiences were that each of you had, what parents can do when they're facing it. And then just we'll wrap up with some interesting little takeaways. So first and foremost, I'm curious, let's talk about what happened, what you did first, because this some of you listening may see this. Maybe you have I hope you don't have a similar nursing situation where there's medication problems, but maybe you just have medical or just general safety concerns, like physical safety concerns, or you find something on the devices that is an app that shouldn't be there. So Hillary, let's start with you first. What was the first thing you did? And like, did you go file a formal complaint process? Who did you decide to talk to first?
Well, for me, it was the other parents and I were talking to each other. One, to try to figure out, did this actually happen? Because we didn't get anything concrete from the school for quite a while, and they weren't really saying anything. So as far as, what did I do first is I went to social media and kind of demanded, I demanded answers. And I feel like that was the next best thing that I could do. And this was prior to Moms for Liberty, but as far as being a joyful warrior, that has never been an easy thing for me to do. I am very much a mama bear. When the people I love,
mama bear.
Yeah, when people I love get hurt, my initial response is to react, and I get enraged and I have to fix it right now. But in this situation, I didn't have any of that control. None of these parents had that control. So all you could really do was, demand accountability and demand answers. And I did that with our social media page. And that's where
you did that too. That was to the board, right? You went to the your local Facebook page or social media pages, and you were reaching out to the board.
Yes. Awesome. And I also sent them an email, and then I shared that email on that same page as well. So everybody knew that I got, that I also reached out that way. And I said, when they respond, I'll post their response. So,
galvanizing the community involvement. I mean, that's definitely getting other people aware and involved and putting it out there. So you kind of went to the media first and foremost, I would say. Is that fair?
Yeah, because we had to. At that point, it was a year after this, everything initially happened. People were still in the dark, even the parents involved that, who got that phone call saying like, hey, this could have happened to your child. They were still really in the dark about a lot of things. And then now she's being sentenced. Now we find out that she was drugging these kids the whole time. I mean, I couldn't go up. I mean, I wasn't going to go up to the school with my megaphone. So I did the next best.
No, I think sometimes that is one of the best ways to get attention right away, is to just, hey, put the pressure on from the get-go. Sure, get a quicker response. Emily, what path did you take when you first saw this? I think you said you reached out to the principal first about it.
Yeah, I thankfully I have a good relationship with the principal. We've had multiple conversations in the past. I go to the school every chance that I can for different things. So there was a good relationship there. Because of that, I knew what his personal stance was on a lot of things. I also know, more importantly, that he knows what the laws are. So I knew by just simply emailing him and saying, this is in violation of the law, he would take that very seriously because, like I said, in previous conversations, he had brought all this up to me. So I knew through that going to him and highlighting that was going to be really the easiest path and that he would take it very seriously. So while that was the first step in that particular situation of raising the concern, it really started well before that of just developing strong relationships with the principal, but also the teachers in the school and the administrators. So having those relationships. So when issues come up, you can have a very civil conversation. And it just makes the conversation easier. It makes it easier for you to approach because not everybody's comfortable asking questions. They feel like it's super aggressive and they don't want to do that. So having a good rapport, it helps a lot in being able to raise concerns as they come up.
That's a really great point, by the way. We've heard this before on both on the Fire of Liberty show, when we're in just the Moms for Liberty chapter calls and other conversations, but also here on our previous campus briefing special edition, just talking about the importance of building relationships with your schools. Take that time to invest in it so that you're not just some random person coming out of nowhere. The school staff knows you. That's such a great point. I can't say that I was very good at that. I have to be honest. I've admitted it before that I was not the most involved because I didn't have a lot of problems, I thought, with my school. I had enough that they definitely knew who I was, but I think I could have been a lot more, I could have built much more with relationships. So I love that encouragement and I think that's just such a great point. Okay, I want to move on to kind of like any obstacles or resistance that you might have faced. So you guys have kind of different story. Well, you have very different stories. So Emily, let's start with you this time. It seems like you had really such a good relationship that maybe you didn't experience a lot of pushback. Did you experience anything overall with the community, with other people in the school district, or, and was it on this or any other things related to the digital policies?
I'm not necessarily had resistance. I think it's just lack of understanding, lack of knowledge. And it's not that it's a bad thing. AI technology, it changes every single day. So there's always just the learning curve with it. My superintendent's really great. I have wonderful things to say about him. He's great at communicating. So I recently sent an email when I registered my son. A couple of things popped up in the registration form. I sent it to him and he was great. He responded back. It took him a little time because I'm asking relatively tough questions when it comes to technology and AI. And when you as a parent start asking questions that say, how are you following FERPA? How are you following COPPA? When you start asking those questions, I think they automatically kind of take a step back and see it as kind of a legal conversation. So they're always very thorough, as they should be. So I think that's just kind of my only somewhat of an obstacle is getting to the point where it is just an open dialogue conversation of I am a parent, also an advocate, trying to truly understand what's going on in the school. What are these processes? How are you ensuring compliance? The schools, like they're wonderful, but they're not technology experts. I don't expect them to be able to understand all the aspects of AI. So how are you as a school assessing all of the aspects of an app that you don't know and you don't understand? So it's just a slow process in communicating. But I think that's probably, like I said, the really only obstacle is just lack of understanding and trying to be patient with each other, that I'm asking questions they don't necessarily have an answer to, but it's not in an aggressive way. It's just trying to help both of us better understand what's happening and ensuring compliance, both on my part as a parent and their part as a school system.
I love that, that you're not seeing this as such a negative thing. I love the grace you're giving right there, because sometimes I think people might, Moms for Liberty might be portrayed a little bit more aggressive or angry or whatever. Not saying there isn't a time for that, because there absolutely is, but we really do want to work with our schools, our school staff, and our school boards. And if possible, just in life in general, it's good to remember that sometimes people just, maybe they're a little hesitant because they just don't understand the full situation. And in technology, especially, I think that we're going to face that a lot. Now, Hillary, you had a slightly different experience, it sounded like. Now, while this wasn't exactly quite as personal, I guess, because your children weren't directly involved, but it was very adjacent to them. So what about you? What sort of resistance did you face? Did you get any resistance in the community, or was it just from the school board and school district?
So actually, the only resistance that I received personally was from the community. And the reason being is because, of course, when you live in a town like ours, we take a very good, we have a lot of pride in our school. Our school is, again, a top performer in our state. It's a really, really great community. Our teachers are fantastic. Our administrators are fantastic. So there's a level of pride, rightfully so, as far as those things are concerned. So people, of course, are protective of that image. Now, when it came to me, at the time, I had these parents reaching out to me because of that initial post, right? And they were so upset, saying, like, they don't feel like they got justice. They don't feel like their story was heard enough. They don't feel like their situation was being taken seriously enough. So I followed up with, well, I'll make a podcast and do it, and we'll talk about it. And actually, it was those parents that helped me write the script to that podcast. Now, did I advertise that? No. I did not share which parents were speaking with me. I didn't share which, whose stories were whose and whose permission I got. I kept that to myself. So from the outside looking in, it was perceived that here is this nobody butting her nose into something, something that's none of her business, that didn't directly affect her. Oh, I got accused of trying to, write a movie, to star in it myself, to be a famous movie star. And oh my God, I mean, things are just coming up. Yeah.
Wow.
Things are coming out of nowhere. Yeah.
I have to say something that you're touching on a concept that I think, because are both of your kids homeschooled now? You said?
Yes, they are now.
Okay. So I've gotten some really interesting, I'm sure you've probably gotten a lot more pushback on this than I have. This concept that, well, you can't actually be that involved, or you shouldn't care that much, because after all, your kids aren't in public school. So why does it matter? And I find this so incredibly ironic, because it's usually the same people that are saying, well, it takes a village to raise a kid, because the reality is even if we don't have kids, and this is my message to parents who either are homeschooling or grandparents or someone who doesn't even have kids, the public school system does matter. The school system does matter to you, because those kids are going to grow up and be the future leaders of our country. And that's why it is extremely relevant to you, period. That's just simple facts. But I think that's so interesting as well, though, like, as another part to that is, You're fighting for the safety of children. Why is that a bad thing? I just don't understand that at all. Why anyone would push back on you? But I don't know. I guess you can't explain everything.
I mean, it took me by surprise because a lot of the comments were from people that I knew, that I worked closely with on the PTO or PTA or whatever it's called.
Wow.
So these are people that knew me personally, that they know that I'm not, the evil monster that they were trying to portray me to be, and anti-public school, because I wasn't. I was having a difficult time hearing the stories from these parents of the same district that I was in, not getting the support that they deserved. And all I could do was just imagine myself in their shoes and just empathizing that heartbreak that they felt. And it broke my heart. And I felt like I had to do something. And that's where my chapter was born, because if I was already being portrayed to be public enemy number one, might as well kick it up a notch.
There you go. Clearly unafraid, which we absolutely see. That very much makes you a joyful warrior, because you definitely have to be able to be a warrior to stand up in some of these fights. Okay, I know we're running long, so I'm going to just move on to one of our final questions that I always like to ask, and that is, what any major takeaways that you would have that maybe we didn't get to cover, something that you really wanted to leave as an encouraging message, or just something to consider for folks that we just might not have had a chance to touch on today. So Hillary, I'll start with you.
I would say, advocate for your kids, follow that gut feeling. A lot of these moms, I did with the story of, well, the nurse said that the aide, the pill dropped on the floor and it rolled onto the desk. That didn't, the mom would tell me that didn't sit right with me. Follow that gut feeling, because she was onto something, that mom gut, that parent gut, when you something's off, something's not right, listen to it and follow it until you find it. It's like that one, in my son's room, that apple that I know he ate that I can't find in the trash can, but I can smell it. Don't stop until you find it, because you're onto something.
Emily, what would you say? I know we talked about a lot of things, and one of the things I didn't get to ask you was you had said when we talked previously, there were very quick little tips that you had when we were talking about simple things that parents could do. And you don't have to cover that. Maybe you have a different takeaway that you would like to include.
No, I'm happy to, because I think it's kind of funny that most parents gloss over it. My son's in 5th grade. We were talking earlier how, we're really getting to the stage where he's going to start pulling away, and he's not going to want to be seen with mom in public. But right now, the past couple of years, he's been all about mom coming to eat lunch with him at school. And as difficult as that is, trying to balance everything with work and him and just life in general, it's really tough finding time to go to school and eat lunch with him. But I have found it has been one of the most beneficial things for both of us. He gets the special treatment for mom being there, and it makes him happy. But I get to go in the school. I get to go in the school any day that I want, unannounced, go to lunch with him, and I get to walk the halls. I get to see what's hanging on the walls, see what's on the door, see who's there. I get to talk to different teachers, different administrators, the front office people. I talk to them every time. Like, we have fun little side conversations now, but it's really being able to be in the classroom, or in the building, I should say, to really see what's going on, to build those relationships, to talk to the janitors, talk to the lunchroom workers. And it really just goes a long way. And then I get to see my kids' friends and have conversations with them. Their parents are there, so I get to have conversations with them as well. So it's really become this very social aspect, where I get to just see the school and interact with all sorts of different people that have an impact on our school system. And I also kind of get to test out the physical security of the building. I wouldn't know that if I'm not going regularly. The actual process that they go through, they know me by name. They know exactly who I am. But every single time, just kind of like Hillary was saying, every time when I get there, I have to show my ID. I have to check in. I have to go through all the steps. Even though they know me, that's the policy and they're following it. So if they're following it with me, I know they're following it with other people, and it can kind of put some of my concerns around safety at ease. So go to lunch with your kids. It's really easy. You will learn a ton.
I think that's such a good point. That's actually a great little teaser for one of our future panels that we're going to be doing, which is talking about being the engaged parent, what that looks like, because sometimes not just engaged as in like trying to fight curriculum or anything like that, but being involved as a parent in your school, because you are a very busy mom. You have a very busy job, and you're still making that time to stay involved. And it's little things like that that's so encouraging. So thank you so much for joining us today, Emily. And we unfortunately lost Hillary. She had to jump a little bit early, but thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Wow, that was really an incredible conversation and pretty shocking. That is not the way that I expected a conversation on school safety to go. Actually, I would say all of our conversations in this back to school series have been great. And if you missed any, don't worry. You can catch the recordings on the Moms for Liberty YouTube channel. So over the past couple days, we've been focusing on school safety. Our guests have shown us that school safety isn't just a single topic issue. It's a network of systems, and any weak link can put children in danger. Rebecca and Emily's experience made it clear that digital safety is far from guaranteed, even on devices issued by the school. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that just because it came from the school, they must have checked all the boxes, reviewed all the apps, know all the things, because the fact of the matter is they probably don't. Hillary reminded us that safety risks aren't just virtual either. Medication mistakes and policy failures can have very serious, very real consequences. In both cases, the pattern is the same. Trusted systems can fail, and when they do, parents must step in, which means knowing school policies, understanding the technology, demanding qualified personnel, and building networks of support with other families. Because whether the danger is hiding in a website, a chatbot, or even the nurse's cabinet, the responsibility to protect children belongs to all of us. And the most powerful safeguard for children is an informed, engaged parent. And at M4LA, we're here to educate you on the topics and equip you with the tools so that you can become an engaged citizen, not an enraged activist. Remember, if this is the topic that lights your fire, and I mean, gosh, how couldn't it? Just know that you're not in this fight alone. Consider joining Moms for Liberty as a national member. It's free, and you'll be part of an amazing, supportive community of joyful warriors. And we've got some incredible topics coming up at M4L Academy for the fall. We've already talked to you a little bit about it, but we'll be covering ed tech and data collection even more in depth. We have MAHA in schools, where we talk about food and pharma. Think of school lunches and school vaccination requirements. And we're also going to be talking about social media, gaming, mental health, and so much more. As was famously said by James Madison, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty, which is the mission of M4L Academy. Thanks again for joining us today. Have a great night.